Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini. Okay, the preface. We come now to the great encyclical Immortale Dei. Immortale Dei. The title of the encyclicals are always taken from the first words of the encyclical. So if you look at the very beginning of the encyclical, on page 5, what are the first two words?
Immortale Dei.
Yeah, which means the immortal work of God. Literally, immortal of God. But it's the order of the Latin. So, this is why by what Pope?
Pope Leo XIII.
Preface. The Latin text is taken exactly from Acta Sanctae Sedis, the Acts of the Apostolic See, of the Holy See. Volume 18, published in Rome in the year of the Lord. What year?
1985.
The text has not been changed in any way, with the following exceptions. The diphthong AE has been changed to... They took two separate letters into one diphthong. OE has been changed to OE attached to each other, which is correct Latin. And consonantal I has been changed to J, which in Latin is pronounced J-R-E. Anyone? Do you ever pronounce J in Latin?
No.
J? Never. Okay. Quotation marks were also changed to modern style. Even unusual spellings such as causa for causa were retained. The English scripture quotations are from the English text is a new translation. Both texts are in the public domain. Okay, so here's a very powerful encyclical. Just read on the back cover. Read that out loud, Tony, loud and clear.
The Catholic state. The Catholic notion of the state, the Republic, had already been under full-scale attack for more than a century when Leo XIII wielded his pen to educate the world. The rights of the Church needed to be vindicated. The rights of the state needed to be explained. This great Pope did both. The Church and the state are not and should not be separate. They should work together for the good of the people. The Church is a perfect society, independent from and superior to the state. Any particular form of government is morally acceptable as long as the rights of the true religion are respected. All these propositions meet a vigorous defense in these pages. This original translation with the authentic Latin text is offered to the world in the hopes of further spreading this great message of Leo XIII. Christus vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat.
Christus vincit.
Vincit.
Everybody, Christus.
Vincit, Christus regnat, Christus imperat.
What's that mean?
Christ reigns.
Christ
Christ
rule.
Christ
Christ
rules,
reigns.
Christ reigns, Christ conquers. Not in that order, but...
Christ vincit, Christus vincit, Christ conquers. Christus regnat, Christ rules, reigns. Christ commands, imperat. Yes. All right, let's start this wonderful encyclical, Immortale Dei. So as we go through this, don't be dozing off, don't be distracted, this is serious business. This is the Pope speaking to the bishops, and we priests, we have to lay our life down on the line to defend these truths. And what the great thing about Pope Leo XIII, he really had the great gift of facing the liberalism of the modern world with the tank of the Catholic teaching. The tanks, that he pulls out the great big tanks that just blasts all the liberal lies and nonsense. So I urge you, as we go through this encyclical day by day and class by class, don't just take it as another class, another booklet to go through. We can't be doing that. So, and this is something Father Dennis Fahey, he would meditate on the papal encyclicals. So I certainly would encourage that. Once you go through Your first half hour of the Holy Hour should be The Spiritual Life by Archbishop Lefebvre, because I really want you to go through that. And then the second part of the meditation can be, you can take this even. And it's not reading when you do meditation, but you're conversing with God as you go through it, right? All right, here we go. Immortale Dei, encyclical letter of His Holiness our Lord, Dominum, Leo the 13th, meaning His Holiness, on the Christian constitution of the states. So important. In De Civitatum Constitutione Christiana. Having this Latin is really nice too, right? Beside it is quite amazing. And this is tough Latin. Leo the 13th was definitely a genius, a scholar, and mastered Latin. So his Latin is quite tough. All right, pick it up, Andres.
The immortal work of the merciful God, which is the Church, although through herself and her nature she looks towards gaining the salvation of souls and the happiness of heaven, nevertheless brings forth so much usefulness beyond that in a certain type of mortal things, that she could not do more or better than as if she were instituted first and foremost for defending the prosperity of this life, which happens on earth. In fact, wherever the Church has placed her footprint, she has immediately changed the face of things, and the popular customs, formerly ignorant of virtue, thus soak up a new sophistication, and however many peoples accepted this with gentleness, excelled with justice of things and glory of deeds.
Glory of deeds, glorious deeds. All right, name one point in history where the Church puts her footstep and changes society for the better. Give one example.
The Roman Empire. It's when she converted Rome, then arose from that center of the world so many geniuses, so many scholars, not just in religion, but also in the secular profane sciences.
Right, so good, true education. And then to take the Roman Empire, what eventually was abolished. In the year 401 was the last gladiatorial game. 401. And you know what it took? It took a monk coming out of the desert. I think his name is Saint Telemachus. He comes out of the desert and he's just horrified by this onslaught still going on. So remember, 313 was the Edict of Milan under Constantine. So as late as 401, or as early as 401, is the last gladiatorial game. So the Catholic Church will put an end to the murders and slaughters and corruption, which happened. So he walked right into the amphitheater in the Colosseum in Rome and said, this manslaughter has to stop. It offends God very much. And the emperor at the time, I don't remember who it was, they kind of mocked him and laughed at him and killed him. But that was the last bloodshed in the Colosseum. That was it. That was all. Never came back. So that's an example. Also, if you go to Mexico in 1519, the great Hernan Cortez, who the liberals can't stand, but he was a truly great man and a real man. As he walked through Mexico, coming to town after town, he saw human sacrifices. And as I said before, children and women and men in their cages waiting for their time to run up the pyramid and getting fattened up to eat them. He would smash those cages. Smash them. So where the Catholic Church puts her footprint, the intellect is enlightened, the will is made strong towards virtue, the passions are put in order, and the commandments become the law of the land. Right? So in Africa, when the priests went to Africa, Archbishop Lefebvre he was not the first generation of missionary priests. He was like the second, third or fourth wave. The first wave to Africa in the mid-1800s. Those priests had to tame these wild tribes. Don't eat your people. They had to put an end to cannibalism. And in some cases, priests were captured, boiled, and eaten. So that's the first wave of priests to these barbaric tribes. And then the great Jesuit saints, St. Isaac Jogues, St. John de Brebeuf, and all them who came to the Indians here on these grounds. Auriesville, New York, the Mohawks, the Iroquois, the Algonquins. They had to teach them, marriage. You stay with one woman and one man. You can't walk around naked all day long. You have to be honest, and you can't steal and cheat. And of course, it took time for the missionaries to teach this. They first had to learn their prayers. They had to first learn who God is. So basic catechism. So if you were a missionary priest at those times, you just can't come in with a sledgehammer, or they'll just kill you. You have to slowly work with them and convert them. So once they learn who God is, that he died for us, his commandments, the Catholic Church, and then you cover the commandments. Sixth and ninth. Well, women have to dress modestly, so you can't walk around naked all day around the tribe. So they start wearing clothes, and then the husbands, they got to be told, no, you can't just beat your wife the way you want her because you're stronger. You have to respect her and treat her with charity and cherish her and use her not as your slave, but as your helpmate. You see how the church just gently changes the heart and enlightens the minds to rise above barbarism. And that's all across the once great Catholic nations that are now sliding back into barbarism and being punished with the Muslim invasions that's going on. Yes, so that's very important. We could say where Spain put her footprint, the faith was planted. And one of the greatest nations in history has to be Catholic Spain, because her empire spread all over the world. And wherever the Empire of Spain went, the Catholic faith came and raised the people up. Wherever Protestant England went, that's when you got the slavery, the slave trade, abused, very heavily abused. There was some slave trade among Catholics too, I can't deny that. But it was heavily abused with Protestants. And then it's true where England went, the British Empire, as Protestant, they did do a lot of good for India. They did do a lot of good for the practical side. They built, they built clean cities. They built septic tanks. They brought in, the modern construction. But they didn't bring the change of morals that the Catholic Church brings. All right? So in Spain, in South America, there were some abuses with Portugal and Spain. Some of the men got greedy. Some of the men got, there's no bishops here to tell me what to do, so I can have us, mess around with all the girls. Yeah, there was that, and drinking, but the priests were there also to rebuke their vices, right? So sometimes the priests didn't get along with some of these conquistadores, because the conquistadores didn't have a pure intention. But this, let me say this, is very important that this be said, and I could run up to the library and grab the actual quote, but it was a very clear order from Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. You Spaniards, we send you and support you to go to South America and to the Americas. Your first purpose is what, according to the rotten liberal modern history books?
Get rich.
By making
Slaves.
Of the
Indians.
Yes, and that is not the case. This is very important. You have to. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand made it very clear. Your first purpose is not to make slaves, but to evangelize them, bring them to the light of the Catholic faith. And you will not abuse them, and you will treat them with honor and respect and so forth. And that's a whole document on this, right? So all these lies that they smear with the abuses, you always have to look at the formal intention of an act. And the formal intention from the King and Queen of Spain was bring them to the Catholic faith. That's very, very important, because even many Catholics fall into those lies, right? And in California now, a lot of the speakers at the missions will say, "Oh, Father Sorrow was here to make slaves of the Indians." And are you kidding? He lived poor with them. He lived and changed their whole life by his example of charity. And they willingly helped him build the missions. They didn't whip any backs. That's all lies. Just read his own writings. Father Sarah was a genuine saint. And as a penance, he never wore sandals. So he walked through the thorns and the hard ground on bare feet. And his feet became like calloused sandals. So all this just to bring out what Leo XIII is saying here is so important. Where the church puts her footprints, it changes everything for the better. Maybe not overnight. It might take 50, 100 years, 200 years, but it's always for the better. And where the conciliar church puts her footprint, what's left?
Destruction, the absence of virtue, the absence of sound teaching.
Sterility. There's no large families in these Novice Ordo parishes. Are you kidding? No one wants to carry that cross, having more children. Are you kidding? So, but in the Catholic Church, yes, you get married to have children and you carry that cross, because that's your way to heaven. But children are a blessing. They're also hard work. So, as soon as you get to the conciliar church, the priests promote NFP in the preparation classes. They teach the priests, of all things, teach them how to avoid having more children by using the calendar. Because as you know, the women have their cycles. I don't know the depths of it, but whatever goes on, they unite physically only in the time when she's least likely to conceive. That's called the rhythm method or the natural family planning. I have to say this because you got to know this. And what are they teaching these young couples? But, do everything to avoid more children. And if you happen to have children because it's an accident, well, we have to put up with that, unfortunately. What a horrible way to approach marriage. As if children were something evil to be avoided. But the Catholic teaching is what, Michael?
The Catholic teaching is that you take all the children that God decides to send you.
Let him do the counting. And all the families where you see this, they're happy families. They're generous. They don't have it easy, but they're happy, right? Because the parents never told God, we only want 3 or 4, and that's it. And we're going to dictate to you how many children we have. That pride is very displeasing to God, right? So where Spain put her footprint, it's a fact. There was always a blossoming. Look what Spain did to South America. I mean, the huge, beautiful missions, saints. Look what they did to California, the Midwest, Southwest. You can still see those missions. And they're incredible. The mission called the Lily of the Desert in Tucson, Arizona. A beautiful mission built by Father Eusebio Kino. On the boys' trips, we often go there and visit and pray. A beautiful mission. Beautiful. And it still has the lions of Spain on the altar in the communion rail. There's still lions there representing the kingdom of Spain. And then what they did to Mexico, right? Mexico. Once Cortez came and then Our Lady of Guadalupe came and overthrew the serpent. By late 1590, early 1600s, you already have Catholic universities in Mexico. By the mid-1600s, they're sending professors to Europe to go teach. That's how advanced a civilization it reached in a short time, which is ignored in all the modern books. So, and that's why the Freemasons in the early 1900s, they said we have to destroy the most Catholic country on earth. And that was Mexico. It was Mexico because of Our Lady. And I like that. I really appreciate the point Father Ruiz made, which I never thought of before. 1500s, already 300 years of philosophical corruption has already seeped into Europe with nominalism, rationalism, and by the 1500s, Protestantism is already soaking and destroying, right? Europe has already been poisoned. But Mexico became Catholic. And for 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, was untouched by all the liberalism of Europe. So it was a true, genuine, fresh Catholicism, like the early church almost. That's why when it was persecuted, it was a pure revival of the faith, a defense of the faith with the Cristeros. It was a pure defense, like the Maccabees in Scripture. They weren't in it for money. It wasn't for glory. It wasn't for land. It was for the glory of Christ the King. And that was their shout. So when in 2006 we had a big bus of 30 boys, and that was something else. And then Father Tim Pfeiffer was with me, and then 3 seminarians in Kasich. And we went with Father Raphael's dad. His father was still alive, and he knew still some Cristeros. So we had to hunt down a real live old Cristeros who was from that 1920s. And we found him in some little town, and there he was sitting outside of his humble home with his wife drinking. He was actually drinking Coke. And imagine for him, this huge bus pulls up and 30 people come pouring out, surrounding them. And he's like, what's going on here? So Father Pfeiffer, who spoke Spanish, and Mr. Arizaga explained to him what was going on. And so he started telling his story. And he was 14 years old when the federales were coming into their towns, killed their parish priest in front of everybody. And they rose up, and he said he fought with the Cristeros with his dad, even though he was underage. He went with his dad to fight. And he said, till today, when he was talking to us, he says, I still have shivers up my spine when I hear the words, Viva Cristo Rey. Because for them it meant, seriously, you're giving your life for Christ the King. And they were ready to do it. So he explained one ambush. The Cristeros hid behind the hedges as the new army of federales was coming into their town to do more damage and kill off the nuns. And then the shout came from the commander, Viva Cristo Rey! And they jumped over the hedges and slaughtered the Masons, the federales. And telling us that story, he became like 20, 30 years younger, because it all came back to him, the excitement, the joy, and the love, because they really were giving their life for Christ. And that's across the board. The 16-year-old boy that was captured, right? I think his name was Brigida. 16 years old. And they say, come and fight with us. You're young, you're strong, we got girls, we got tequila. Fun time. He says, no, I fight for Christ the King. And they said, okay, if you're not going to buy our bribes. And he shouted, Viva Cristo Rey. So they said, okay, we're going to shut you up. And one of the federales looked him in the eye, cut out his tongue, and blood was pouring out of his mouth. He couldn't speak anymore. So with his right hand, he made the sign of the cross. This is the stuff that boys are supposed to be. So they got more angry with him and chopped off his right hand. And with his bloody stump, he still made the sign of the cross. And then they just shot him with bullets. That's a boy of 16, right? And all across the board, the old men, young men, middle-aged men were fighting. And the girls, the St. Joan of Arc Brigade, they were helping too, the ladies, right? With ammunition, with information, with medical, with transport. So that's beautiful, that first wave of the Cristeros and the second wave when they were betrayed by the bishops and priests. The most tragic was the third wave in the 1930s, because then the priests and the bishops gave no support. And that's when Father de Maldonado was taken and beaten to death. He was carrying the Blessed Sacrament and dragged him up to the second story of a big stone building. And they tried to get the host, the consecrated host, in the golden pyx out of his hand. He wouldn't open his hand. They used crowbars, they tortured him, they hung him upside down outside the window with his face facing the wall, and smashed, with his hands tied, smashed his face into the stone wall until it was all blood. And then they beat him to death with their rifle butts. This is Father Pedro de Maldonado. And when he died, his hand still didn't open. So they had to call the local bishop to come, and when the bishop came, his hand open, and the bishop took the Blessed Sacrament. So I know this story from one of the priests that was down there. After the blood was all over the wall, and the Catholic Mexicans were coming to soak their handkerchiefs in the blood of a martyr. So the Freemasons got all upset, and they took hoses and washed it all down. Next day, blood was back on the wall. People were coming to collect the blood. And they came and washed it all down. Third day, blood was back. People were coming to collect relics. So the Masons decided to bulldoze the whole building. But the point is, Mexico and parts of South America, they had that fresh love of the faith without the contamination of liberalism and nominalism and all the errors that were soaking throughout Europe at the time. So it's a very beautiful point, because the Cristeros really were like the Maccabees. And saints, great heroic saints of all ages. One man was a married man, a father of children. And a lot of them were fathers of, married men. And there's one picture where the guy, in the battle, I forgot his name, he ran out of ammo fighting the Federales. But he didn't want his rifle to go to the hands of the Federales. So he took his rifle, broke it in half. And with the two pieces, the wooden frame of the Winchester 30-30, he held it up in the form of a cross as the cavalry of the Freemasons was coming on him. And they crushed him and killed him. But he was shouting, "Viva Cristo Rey." So there's a picture of his wife and his brother holding his body up like a trophy. Another martyr, right? And there's just tons of stories, tons of them that are also lost, So I'm just saying this because where Spain put her feet, the Catholic faith was planted. And that goes for Florida as well. Florida up to Virginia was all Catholic. There was missions all on the eastern side on the Atlantic Ocean. Missions all along, more than on the west coast. But they were all demolished by the Protestants. Okay, let's pick up. Anyway, we diverted a bit, but very important. Read on, Andres.
But there is an old and ancient censure that the Church is said to be at variance with the sensibilities of the Republic, and that she cannot give anything either suitable or decorative, which a well-constituted state seeks after in its own law and from its own will.
So in other words, the church is backward. The church is not with it. The church doesn't understand modern governments. And Leo XIII is saying, don't mess with the Church of Christ. And here's why. Go on.
In the early days of the church, Christians were shaken by a similar wickedness of opinion, and because of this reason, we became accustomed to be called, in hatred and dislike, enemies of the empire. By which time, the blame for the evils by which the Republic was being upset was generally pleased to be cast on the Christian name, when in fact God, the avenger of wickedness, was weighing just punishments for criminals. The fury of this calumny, not without cause, armed the spirit and sharpened the pen of Augustine, who especially in the city of God located the strength of Christian wisdom, which necessarily has a part with the Republic, in such a light that he spoke the cause not only for the Christians of his own time, but seems to have made a perpetual triumph over the false accusations.
Yes, so his defense of the Catholic Church, which he wrote in the big work called City of God, it was a defense against the attacks of the pagans, that the Christians were the ones causing all the trouble in the empire. So St. Augustine answers it and says, no, the Catholicism brings the light of God's grace and the commandments and morality and true intellectual light. So if you ever read The City of God by St. Augustine, realize it's a defense against the pagan attacks. And it's a wonderful work. It's in there, the famous quote, 2 loves have built 2 cities. Anybody?
The love of man.
To the love of self, to the despising of,
God.
and the love of God.
Reaching to the despising of self.
Yes, 2 loves have built 2 cities. So he calls the city of Babylon this world, and he calls the city of the heavenly Jerusalem the Catholic Church. So remember that when we pray all the Psalms, when you mention Israel, when you mention Jerusalem, Mount Sion, St. Augustine sees these are all the Catholic Church, because the old Jerusalem has been destroyed. The Jewish religion's dead. And Israel now is the Catholic Church. The real Israelites are those who believed, like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, in the true Messiah. So the modern day Israel, they're apostates. They reject the true Messiah. And they want to build their empire for the fake Messiah, who will be who?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, and that's why all this is moving quite quickly, right? The whole Gaza cleanup, the genocide, and the U.S. supporting 100% all this, and this a fake peace, and the one world government, one world money system. Now they're quickly moving into the digital. Some country, I think Vietnam has already gone digital. And if you don't update your information to give your retina scan, your fingerprints, your face structure, then you lose your account. So you have to update and get into the new mode if you're going to keep your money. So that's what they're doing now. And that's Vietnam, which we consider backwards, but they're not. All right, go on, please. Anthony. We're on the bottom of page 6.
However,
Loud and speak clearly, don't mumble.
However, the deadly desire of similar complaints and accusations did not cease, and it certainly pleased very many to look elsewhere for the civil teaching of living, other than, that is, from the doctrines which the Catholic Church approves. No, indeed, finally, in this time, a new law, as they call it, which they claim to be a certain growth born from advancing liberty, began to be strong and to dominate everywhere. But many men have tried as many things as they wish. It is certain that there is no more excellent rationale of founding and controlling the state than what blossoms forth freely from the gospel teaching. Therefore, it is of the greatest moment and clearly pertaining to our apostolic office that we compare the new opinions of the Republic with Christian doctrine, by which means we trust that, the truth coming forth, the causes of errors in doubt will be burst, that any one may more easily be able to see those greatest precepts of living, which he must follow and into which he must attend.
So in the face of the new republic, that is the French Revolution, and the glory of man, and the killing off of the lawful authority, and promoting the new democracy, all authority comes from
The people.
people, yeah, by the people, for the people. That we're going to deal with that now, says Leo XIII, and we're going to see how the Catholic Church treats these new revolutions, which were spawned by who? Who spawned the French Revolution?
The nations.
The Freemasons. And they boast about it. It's not hidden, it's something they boast about. They have celebrations for the Declaration of the Rights of Man. Father Denis Fahey goes heavily into this. And then who spawned the Bolshevik Revolution, the Communist Revolution?
The Jews and the Masons, I believe.
Yeah. And all their names were, they had to take fake Russian names, but when you get to their real name, they're all Jewish. And that's a fact. That's not racial hatred, that's just a fact of history. And they don't like facts of history, these liberals. All right, read on, please, Michael.
It is not a great task to set up what the type and form of the state should be by the Christian philosophy governing the Republic. It is incorruptible, incorporated by nature into man, that he should live in civil society, for it is necessary for the habitation and preparation of life. And again, he cannot gain perfection of nature and mind when he is alone. The divinity has provided that he is born into the joining and gathering of men, since it is domestic, and then also civil society, which alone can supply a complete sufficiency of life. Because, in truth, any society cannot persist unless someone stands at its head, moving each one by an effective and similar influence to a common intention. It comes about that authority is necessary for the civil community of men, by which it might be ruled, which, no different from society also, arises by nature, and therefore by God himself, its author.
Okay, another very important point he's making here is men living in society, it is from God. It's established by God. And so when men live in society, you need an authority to properly govern. And that authority has its authority from God. So this is very important because Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the so-called philosophes of the French Revolution, they were teaching society as an artificial construction. And men are innocent by birth. Well, we'll just pick up next time. Dive into that. Adjutorium nostrum in nomine Domini.